And we welcome you back to 757 Saturday Sports Talk on CoVA Sports TV. Like, share, and subscribe wherever you are tuning in, be it on YouTube, be it on social pages like the IG, be it the Facebook, the LinkedIn, VirginiaPreps.com, and so much more. We now have a special guest. We do believe us here on the program. He is the play-by-play voice for the NBA's Milwaukee Bucks. We say hello to our pal, Dave Koehn. Dave, you out there?
Hey, guys. How are you? Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear. Thanks for squeezing us in this morning on your busy schedule. You guys are back home at Fiserv Forum and got a nice win last night over the Pacers to get back in this series, beating them. And Gary Trent Jr., what can you say with his career performance? Certainly Giannis Antetokounmpo gets the headlines, and rightfully so, with how wonderful he has been all year long, carrying this Bucks team that's been a little up and down. But my goodness, Trent probably had the game of his life, not just high school, college, pro included.
Yeah, I mean, I tell you, it's funny because there aren't too many guys in the world that can put up 37 points, 12 rebounds, 6 assists, do it shooting 70%, and be the second story on a team. But that's kind of how it is with Giannis. You just expect the greatness because Gary Trent Jr., he was the story of this game. I mean, you know, the Bucks had a real challenge in this playoff series in so many ways against this Pacers team, just from a matchup perspective. And he was inserted into the starting lineup. It was only his third start since November 6th. He'd been a real guy, key contributor for this team off the bench. But man, to say he was a key contributor is really underselling this thing because 37 points with 9 3-pointers, tying a franchise record with those 9 3-pointers Ray Allen set way back in 2001. It was a spectacle. And not only the offense, the defense was a big part of it. That's the reason he was inserted, because Tyrese Halliburton had just been really kind of running roughshod over the Bucks over the course of this series. And he's been a real matchup problem for this Bucks team. And it doesn't help that he's a Wisconsin native and seems to relish the idea of wearing the black hat every time he takes on his home state team. And, you know, every time he touched it, one of those deals where he's getting booed, particularly early in the game. But, he was outstanding against him. I thought Gary Trent and really, from an entire team perspective, the Bucks kind of rediscovered their identity in this series. So we'll see if they can translate it on, because Rick Carlisle, another guy with Virginia roots, is a hell of a coach, and his ability to adjust and exploit weaknesses is so profound. And so we'll see. The chess match begins, and that's one of the great things about NBA playoffs is just watching teams adjust throughout the series and try to exploit the other side's deficiencies.
No question about that, Dave. Before I let Ed jump in here, you had the great stat last night. I heard you say during the broadcast, this was a must-win spot for the Bucks because teams leading a best-of-7 series in the NBA playoffs, 3-0, are 157-0. And it was not looking great because the Pacers were up 10 at the break. Dame Lillard struggling at 1 of 10 from the floor, 0 of 6 from 3. If it's not for Gary Trent Jr.'s 6 of 9 start, the rest of the team going just 2 of 20 from distance, might have been out of the game completely. But another little lineup tweak that Doc had in the series that might go unnoticed to some. Jericho Sims comes in, 6'10", with versatility to play on the perimeter. More minutes for him now compared to Taurean Prince, who was starting, 6'6" forward, who now goes to the bench. Maybe found a matchup they can use. And now the Pacers, certainly you expect bounce-back games from guys like Miles Turner, Andrew Nembhard, and TJ McConnell, but Pascal Siakam remains solid. And now if you get this thing at 2-2, it becomes perhaps the most interesting first-round series, because we got some duds potentially here. If the Clippers put the Nuggets away, you don't know what's going to happen with Wolves-Lakers. This could become the must-see series for a game 6 and 7 if Milwaukee can get one more coming up on Sunday night. What do you think? Did we lose you, Dave?
I got kicked out of the room.
We
got
you
me
now.
Back?
Yeah, we got you now. Sorry about that.
Okay, that's all right. So I heard most of your lead into that question, but one thing I heard you say at the beginning was regarding Jericho Sims, and that was a pretty astute observation, because this is a guy that doesn't get a lot of headlines or a lot of press, but he has been a key contributor for this Bucks team just because of the physicality he brings in his defense, something that has been at times in short supply for the Milwaukee Bucks. But this Bucks team, they do have players that can get, the size and the physicality has been something Doc Rivers has been trying to bring out on this team all season long. And at times it's been there, but it's been such a shifting rotation and lineup with new faces. Of course, Sims was brought into the trade deadline. And then you had Bobby Portis suspended for 25 games. Damian Lillard missed 15 straight games. And so it's just been a rotation of different faces with not a true opportunity for these guys to truly gel. And so that's the challenge the Bucks face here in these playoffs. But they're going to have to do it on the fly here. But I thought last night was a good step forward. And, the statistics are fascinating when you look at the series because historicals will tell you, you mentioned that 157 and nothing record for teams that take a 3-games-to-none lead in a series. But then there's also the number that tells you if you go out in front 2-games-to-none, teams win 92% of the time, which to me was staggering. I was really shocked to see that number, especially when you consider that the Bucks have been a part of 3 of the teams that have come back from 2-games-to-none in the last 5 years, including twice during their championship run and also against Toronto when they were on the wrong side of it when the Raptors won their title in 2019. So, it can happen, but it doesn't happen often. So Bucks obviously needed, excuse me, to win that game last night to put themselves in a position where they would be in a much better spot because, if you win this thing tomorrow night, obviously this thing's even going back to Indiana, but the Bucks are going to have to find a way to beat the Pacers on the road at some point. And I think tomorrow night's going to be a dogfight.
For sure. We're chatting with Dave Koehn, the play-by-play voice of the NBA's Milwaukee Bucks. Our guest here on 757 Saturday Sports Talk on CoVA Sports TV. Like, share, and subscribe as the Bucks take on the Pacers, hosting them coming up on Sunday night in a key game number 4.
Hey, Dave, thanks for coming on. This is Ed Young. Going into this series, my thinking was Bucks. I actually picked Bucks in 6, and then it didn't start out too good. I thought Milwaukee is top to bottom the better team. I know Indiana beat them last year. Giannis is one of my favorite players, and I just think he leads too much. You kind of touched on it with Milwaukee with, Lillard injured, Bobby Porter's situation, whatever. Where are the key matchups, or where in those Pacer wins are the Bucks faulting or shortcomings coming from?
Yeah, Ed, I think it's a case where it comes down to matchups. And as I mentioned, I think Rick Carlisle has been so adept at finding the right matchup for his team. And for the Bucks, I think in this thing, the matchup problems occur in some ways due to their size. Brook Lopez has had a hard time in this series, and so has Taurean Prince. Prince has been positioned at the 2 guard all season long, and he is a long player for a 2 guard. And they've found him up against guys like Halliburton regularly. They've gotten that switch to Prince and just has not been able to keep him. And then they find a way to get him isolated on Lopez, and he's been able to use that quickness. So you're talking about the anchor of the Bucks defense, who has covered so many mistakes all season long from his teammates with his ability to protect the rim. But suddenly in this series, he's been asked to take on some things that are really not fair for a guy his size, trying to defend a jitterbug like Tyrese Halliburton in isolation at times. And so that's where the Bucks have really needed to readjust in terms of not only their lineup, but even their approach and their execution on defense. And that's the trying to find ways to in this case, help Brook Lopez defensively. Brook, Doc Rivers talked about it in practice the other day. He said to these guys, he said, listen, guys, Brook Lopez has been covering your backs all season long. Now you got to start helping cover his back in this matchup, because it's just put him in a pretty unenviable position to be defending some players that he wouldn't otherwise. And so, that's where this series will continue to be interesting to see if the Bucks can keep finding ways to avoid some of those matchup problems. And I think putting Gary Trent into the starting lineup was a big part of it. Taurean Prince only played 3 minutes last night, and I thought that was very notable as you saw some additional minutes put on guys like A.J. Green, who's been a bit of a revelation defensively this season for the Bucks in addition to his shooting. But then Kevin Porter Jr. saw way more minutes last night. And so, and we mentioned Jericho Sims. He played 14 and a half minutes. He only played, I think it was like 8 minutes in the first game. So that he played. He missed the first game as well. So, it's been interesting to see that evolution over the course of this series, as the chess match really begins between these coaches now. So it'd be fascinating to see what it looks like tomorrow night. But yeah, that's really been the deficiency. And the other part of it is the Bucks, who led the league in 3-point shooting, shot 32% through the first 2 games from 3-point range. And then first half of this game last night, they were 4 of 23 before, the blitz arrived. And that was largely fueled by Gary Trent Jr. But nonetheless, they started to hit those threes. And it is a make-miss league, and especially so for this Bucks team that's built with shooters surrounding Giannis Antetokounmpo, who is a gravitational force, can pull attention in. You've got to be able to punish teams when they put that wall around him with your shooters outside.
Yeah, my thinking was Giannis needs a lot of help in this. He can't do it all himself. I do think he's extremely talented, one of the top 10 players in the NBA, but he can't beat a team by himself. And you mentioned the size of Milwaukee against maybe the quickness, speed of Indiana. I know as a longtime high school coach, people will ask me, what's harder to guard, height or speed? And I've always said speed and quickness bothers me more so than height. I can neutralize height. It's harder to confine that speed and quickness. And I think you're right with the Bucks. That's where they got to figure it out. And I'm a big Doc Rivers fan. I mean, I've always liked Doc Rivers as a player, all the way back to his college days, but in NBA and whatever. And I've always rooted for him. That was my next question was, I know last year when they hired Doc Rivers, a lot of people were like, oh my God, what are we doing? How has that been with the Buck fans? And if they get bumped by Indiana, will there be heat on Doc, or let's get over that and take care of other issues?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think the heat is always on if you're in the NBA. If you are an NBA head coach right now, you're an endangered species at all times. There was a target on your back no matter what. Now, that said, these guys are paid handsomely. Mike Budenholzer, who I had a chance to work with the first couple of years I was here in Milwaukee, is off of his second team in the last 2 years, and he's going to be paid $10 million a year to do nothing if he wants to till 2029. So that's pretty good work if you can get it. Now, that said, these guys want to be coaching. They don't want to be sitting on the sideline and relegated to the side. And in fact, Doc Rivers even talked about that fact when some of these coaches were getting let go. It was, around the time that Memphis had severed ties with, Coach Jenkins, and then obviously with the Nuggets as well with Michael Malone, and two very successful head coaches who had, had the rug pulled out for him at the end of the season. Very strange timing, but and Doc had said, listen, it's gotten kind of crazy. He doesn't think it's entirely fair, and but it is life in the NBA these days, and I suspect it's that way for Doc Rivers. I've not heard anyone suggest that his job is in jeopardy, but I put nothing past anybody in this league now. I really don't, and. In terms of the fans' response, I don't know why it is, but Doc certainly has gotten a tough rep with a lot of fans. And I don't know. I think he takes a lot of, to me, sometimes unfounded criticism. Does he make mistakes? Yeah. Any coach will make some mistakes over the course of a series. I mean, it's just a challenge. But it's a two-way street. I thought he took so much heat for his time with Philadelphia, when the reality is he was coaching two of the more toxic situations I've seen in the NBA, with Joel Embiid playing with Ben Simmons, and then you had the James Harden situation with Harden, and it's just personalities that were just not jiving, and it was not working. You want to put that at the feet of the head coach? I don't know. Be my guest, but I think that at some point the players bear some responsibility as well. But so here in Milwaukee, it's starting to dial up a little bit. Look, the reality is when he was introduced, there was a smattering of boos last night in Milwaukee when Doc Rivers was introduced. So it's the first time I'd heard that. So I suspect it may be a little different. I mean, fans and their opinions of things are very fickle. It goes with the wind. Now that they came back and won that game 2 or game 3, and now you're in a position to tie the series, we'll see what it's like tomorrow night. But it really is with the wind in terms of fan perception. You just can't dwell on it because it's as fickle in nature as anything. I mean, it just depends. It's completely what have you done for me lately. But I've thought he's been a good addition to this franchise because one of the things I've always really been impressed with Doc Rivers is his ability to relate with players, and I don't get the sense that there's any sentiment in a locker room that they don't think Doc is the guy to be leading them, and I think that's critically important for any NBA franchise, because when that locker room turns on you, I mean, Mike Budenholzer once told me, he said, listen, this was when I first got there. He said, you got to know what you're doing, because in this league, if you don't know what you're doing, those players, they'll smell it and they will turn on you and you will lose that locker room. I don't think Doc Rivers has come anywhere close to that. But yeah, from a fan perspective, I think he's always battling it.
So true, and you'll get the Ed Young rant channeled here, Dave, because he's going to defend his coaching brethren to the end of time, whether it's Mike Budenholzer, whether it's Michael Malone from the Nuggets, Taylor Jenkins of the Grizzlies, some guys that may have unceremoniously got booted out, and some are wondering about those decisions. A couple of those Western Conference teams that are now chilling their series. Couple more minutes here with Dave Koehn, the play-by-play voice of the Milwaukee Bucks, before we let him run here on 757 Saturday Sports Talk on CoVA Sports TV. Like, share, and subscribe in advance of the quad header of games coming up on Sunday with the Knicks at the Pistons, game number 4, Lakers at the Wolves, game number 4, Celtics at the Magic, game number 4, and, of course, Milwaukee hosting Indiana coming up at 9:30 Eastern, 8:30 Central in game number 4, that Eastern Conference Series. 4 games today in the NBA playoffs with the Rockets at the Warriors tonight, Nuggets at the Clippers, Thunder at the Grizzlies, and the one that starts it off with Cavaliers at Heat. And I want to go there with you, Dave, because I know you keep an eye on the other series happening. And once upon a time, as I teased, you were the play-by-play voice for UVA during its national championship run, and glory, and a couple of former Wahoos making some noise. DeAndre Hunter, who made the move, got traded to Cleveland, and Ty Jerome might not be stunned with Hunter because he was a first-round pick. Ty Jerome, oh my goodness, he almost got 6th man of the year, and Cleveland looks like a team that can win the whole thing potentially.
Yeah, those guys are really good. I know they foundered a little bit down the stretch, but every time the Bucks played them, I looked at that group and I just said, I don't see the weakness on this roster. I just don't see the weakness. Maybe a little bit defensively in that backcourt, but even then, you've got Evan Mobley, and you've got, you've got this backcourt that can lock it down for Cleveland. I should say backcourt, yeah, defensively that can just cut you down. And I think that makes it such a tough matchup. And then they get even better by adding DeAndre Hunter at the trade deadline. I thought that was an incredible pickup. Obviously, I have a little bit of a biased lens having covered the guy throughout his college career, but I just think his versatility in this league, he's got everything teams are after. That ability to guard a 3-man is with a long wingspan and ability to move, and then his ability to knock down 3-pointers. So, I thought that was a great pickup. And then obviously Ty Jerome blossoming too. I mean, it is kind of cool that you got a couple Cavaliers growing together as Cavaliers again. I mean, you can't write this stuff, and with a chance to chase another title as a duo. So, that's a tough team, and I really do wonder what they're going to look like in this postseason. Everybody wants to talk about Boston so much, and I understand Boston won the title a year ago, and they've been incredibly good down the stretch run of the regular season, even though they dropped one last night in Orlando. But I think that Cleveland team has every bit as much a chance to win this thing as Boston. The only thing they don't have is the recent history.
Absolutely, Ed.
Dave, my question, I'm a big Celtic fan, just major. Of course, they lost last night, which I kind of predicted. I think Tatum set out. They're up 2-0 back, they're in Orlando. I'm going to give Orlando one. They get their one shot.
Tatum actually had 36 last night, but he sat out game 3.
Oh, okay, set out game 3.
Yes.
My question to you, Dave,
Game two. Go ahead. Yeah.
My question is everybody chasing the Celtics, or no, they're in the middle of the pack with everybody else?
Well, until somebody beats them, I think you have to say they're chasing them, because just in terms of their demonstrated performance, again, you win a title a year ago, and you basically bring everybody back this season who with guys that are even playing better. But I do think it's really hard to win back-to-back in this league for a couple of reasons. I was part of the Bucks team that was trying to defend its title. That was my first season here. And, I just saw what it takes. You need to be lucky. And I think the Celtics are starting to feel a little bit of that injury issue. You mentioned that Tatum was questionable going into that game last night. He did end up playing, but he's dealing with some stuff now. Jaylen Brown's dealing with some stuff. And, Drew Holiday sat that game out last night for Boston. So he's dealing with some stuff too. So the injury bug starts to creep in. That obviously has an impact. To be that lucky back-to-back years. Now, that said, Porzingis missed a good chunk of their postseason a year ago, but the teams that they played against were even more ravaged by injuries throughout that postseason run. So, there's so much luck that goes into this thing to win it, and then to do it 2 years in a row. And then on top of it, the other part is I just think that there is an element of that hunger when you've won it before, particularly in the regular season. I think that's what maybe is most impressive to me about what Boston did, is they kept their pedal to the metal throughout that regular season, when that really now is when it starts to matter. But sometimes it's hard to flip that switch on. So, I do think it's fair to say that this team is the favorite because of what they've done in the regular season and what they did a year ago and who their personnel is this year. But no, I mean, I don't think that they're by any stretch the prohibitive favorite. I think Cleveland's right there with them. Yeah, I'm not as sold on New York right now, but we'll see where they go. And the other thing is, the one thing I got to add is, and look, I understand that I work with this team, so I'm obviously biased to them, but the Bucks have not to this point established themselves as a true title threat. However, if Damian Lillard can find that form that made him a top 75 player, I mean, the Bucks just did this with Damian Lillard last night, going one for, let's see, what was his line? He was 2 for 12, 1 for 8 from 3-point range with 7 points, and you still found a way to get this win. If he starts to get things going, I do think the Bucks, with all those pieces around them, can be a formidable threat that could potentially be a title threat too on the outside right now looking in. But again, if Lillard finds that form and becomes the player they traded for, you put him and Giannis together, the way Giannis is going and some of those role players, this team becomes a tough out. But that's a big if, because we just haven't seen it from Dame just yet. And he's running out of time to do that. However, coming back from 15 games out to be in that spot, he's got to find his rhythm. And understandably, it's taken a little bit of time.
No, it's an intriguing point there, Dave, because someone I was just speaking with in the NBA the other day told me, look, the Pacers better make sure they get one in Milwaukee, because they don't want that thing going back to a game 5, 2 up, or in a position where either Giannis or Dame Lillard, once he gets fully healthy from this blood clot issue, we've seen Dame time and how explosive he can be in a key spot. I don't think Giannis or Dame or that Bucks team would be afraid of a second-round matchup with the Cavs if they got there, got to get there first, or even a conference final matchup with we say, hey, Boston, got to get there. A lot to get there first, and if you lose game 4, you go down 3-1, you're looking at almost an insurmountable challenge. Last one, we'll let you run. We appreciate the time here. How about the West real quickly? OKC has been incredible. That rally in game 3, granted, John Moran got hurt, but from down almost 30 points, second largest in NBA playoff history. Are they the definite team in the West, or are you keeping an eye peeled on the Clippers? And Lakers got some issues right now, down 2-1. Warriors got some issues with Jimmy Butler. What do you make of the West?
Yeah, I think they are the prohibitive favorite out West right now as things sit. But, LA is a fascinating team, the Clippers, that is, because we just haven't seen Kawhi Leonard at this level in a while. And he's looking like early Toronto, Kawhi Leonard. Even you can make the case San Antonio, Kawhi Leonard, with the way he's playing right now. And he's just a handful when he's this good. And then you put him with Harden, who's playing well in the playoffs this time so far. So, they're an intriguing team. But yes, OKC definitely has to be the prohibitive favorite. I was so, it's another team. When we were done playing those guys for the third time this year, and now keep in mind, the Bucks handled OKC in the in-season tournament, the game that technically didn't even happen in the championship game, right? But the Bucks were definitely this is really maybe one of the times that I thought the Bucks established their physicality in a way that Doc Rivers has been imploring them to do, when they really manhandled the Thunder and held them to, I think it was like 84 points or something like that back then. But it was a dominant showing. However, they repaid the favor later in the season, and I just think this group is so complete with what they're able to do. And I love the way they play together. They're a young team. I think they're the youngest team in the league. And they're still as effective as they are. They seem like a group that really likes to be together. And I think that's so incredibly important for any team in terms of chemistry. That's the great intangible. I did a game this year at one point, and Wesley Matthews was my broadcast partner. I actually did it on TV with him, and he was a former Buck, longtime veteran. He was talking about those late Bucks teams that won the title, and he said, one of the things that people don't talk about enough with those teams was we loved to be together. He said, if there was a kid's birthday, one of our kids, everybody was there. We just spent a ton of time together, and he said, I don't think owners fully appreciate that wins you games. And I just get the sense, and this could be totally wrong, but from what I look at with that Oklahoma City team, I get the sense that they've got some of that. So now the one thing I do think about with them, and I wonder if they have been so reliant on scoring points off turnovers. Are you able to keep doing that throughout the playoffs as much? I don't know. And obviously they don't have a ton of experience, but the only way you get experience is by playing. This is year 2 that they've been in this spot. So I do think that team has a very good chance to win it all this season. If they do, get used to it, because with all of the assets they have and as young as that team is, they are not going anywhere anytime soon. Sam Presti's done an amazing job putting that team together.
No, it's an excellent point, David. They were my pick to win it before the season. I feel even better about it now. And you are so spot on, because every time you watch these post-game interviews, whether it's Shea Gilgeous-Alexander or Chet Holmgren, the whole group is with him, whoever it is, doing the on-court TV interviews. So it's so right there on the money. Well, thank you so much for the time this morning, squeezing us in. All the best to you and the Bucks moving forward. Say hello to our pal Corey Alexander later today, and we'll chat with you down the road.
All right, sounds good, fellas. You enjoy your Saturday.
You got it.
Thanks,
That is
Dave.
the one and only Dave Koehn, play-by-play voice of the Milwaukee Bucks, here with us on 757.